So, before we talk about model United Nations, we should learn what the United Nations is. So, the United Nations was founded in 1945 after World War II to maintain peace and achieve international cooperation. United Nations members, 193 nations, represent most of the world's sovereign states. Now, when people think of the UN, they think of the UN as one large entity. Oh, there's the UN, but the UN actually breaks up into many smaller parts. You can see here every bold word is a subcommittee, its own body with its own budget, its own responsibilities, and the UN has a lot of things going on. You can see here in the name, you can see what these things are. There's the Economic Forum, United Nations Environmental Program, and so on. Some notable examples are the World Health Organization, World Food Program, Environmental Program, and many others. And in all of these, you see what they do in the name. So when you simulate the United Nations, it's not the United Nations, it's a specific body with specific responsibility and mandate. So if you are the World Food Program, you're not dealing with health. You're not dealing with intellectual property. You're not dealing with children. You're not dealing with, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with food, for example. The United Nations also is very surprising for students in some parts of the world that the UN even really exists because we don't cross it come across it in our day-to-day lives. So we show this map of the United Nations world operation, and you can see here that there are a lot of things happening all over the world, in fact, with the exception of three categories of places. So, can someone tell me where is the United Nations not? You're all on mute, so unmute yourself when you say. Where is there no
Greenland,
United Nations?
Canada,
Good,
US,
good. None another. Where else is it not?
Australia.
Yep, it's not in Australia. Good.
New
Where else is it
Zealand,
not? Not in New Zealand. What other
and
areas have
Antarctica probably not.
good, none in Antarctica. Where do we see comparatively little UN activity? There's also some areas where it's not concentrated. Where are they?
Western Europe, Northern Europe.
Western Europe, good, none in Western Europe. Excellent. Where else?
North Africa, maybe.
North Africa, very good. Now, what is in North Africa? What is in this part of the map in North Africa?
Very low population.
World Bank
What what is
project.
the right? There's low
World Bank
population.
project.
What is the reason?
The Sahara Desert.
Bingo, Sahara Desert. Good. It's very hot. Not a lot of people. What else? What other area is there not a lot of population that we can see here?
Greenland, Iceland.
Good. Good north. Where else? The top of which country?
Russia.
Russia. Very good. Now, why are there no people in Greenland and Iceland in the top of Russia? Because it's
Oh,
very cold. Very good. So what we can see here is the Sahara, Siberia, and the other countries that they have in common is rich countries. So there's no UN where there's no people, and there's no UN and countries which have services and working systems. But everywhere else, the United Nations works all over the world. And when you're teaching this to students, you want to make it very clear that these UN operations with the blue hats and the blue bags are part of day-to-day life in many parts of the world. Also, there are the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the goals the UN has taken upon itself: no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, and so on. The United Nations has all of these things. By the way, just something interesting to flag is that in 2030, they are going to change their goals. So if you're doing Model UN in the coming years, very soon we'll be telling students, you are going to see this change during your time in the MUN sphere. Every 15 years, the UN chooses goals that was previously the Millennium Development Goals, which were considered overall successful. Now they pick these, and they're probably already starting to work on the list of what they're going to choose next. The Sustainable Development Goals, each one of these had subcategories and subclauses if you are interested. What does the United Nations do? Does it leave a mark? Okay, we understand, we see all these pictures, but let's get some numbers. So, United Nations feeds over 100 million people annually. Safe drinking water to over 300 million people. Shelter and healthcare for over 60 million refugees. And a eradication of polio in 26 countries. So these are serious numbers of people impacted by the United Nations. Now, the thing we know is that sometimes, especially as educators, we can see the flaws in the UN, the way it's not able to help with, larger geopolitical crises or how UN votes and, the UN is, trumping, inaccurately representing situations and, causing trouble in certain areas. And sometimes that's all students will hear at home, are the problems with the UN. So this next quote, I think, exemplifies, a way to look at the UN pretty well. Brian, can you please read?
The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. Dag
All right.
Hammarskjöld.
Excellent. Okay, so Doug Hammarskjöld, second UN Secretary General. This is one of his quotes. He's a very quotable guy and a very, very impressive person overall. He actually really believed in the UN and died trying to solve something called the Congo crisis in the 1960s while trying to fly between there. Fascinating historical period. And this is saying that the UN can't really push around the countries that are bankrolling it. And the difference between the UN and the League of Nations, and this is something that I used to bring up with students, but I found it wasn't really necessary to talk about, that there was a League of Nations that didn't work, and now the UN is the second attempt. The League of Nations had no executive power. It didn't have a budget. It was, a more, I guess, representative until countries felt that they didn't want to be part of it anymore. And that was that. And this is different from the UN, which started off with a budget, with an army, with the peacekeeping forces, and the ability to actually do things, to fund projects to help countries. Is it perfect? No, because the members who are in these peacekeepers, they come from different countries, and they don't always know the conflicts they're going into. It's not always perfect. But when it comes to the lowest rungs of life, to disease, to hunger, to basic education, basic medication, the United Nations helps millions of people. And couldn't find the mute button in time. And that's yeah, and that's something really important to emphasize, because if all people hear is negative, useless, not helpful, there's a whole other side of it that isn't really talked about, especially if you're in a developed nation or if you're in a city that functions and you don't realize what other places where things are. I'd say for myself was interesting when I went to Petra and they had a tent which was protecting us from the sun, and the walls of the tent were made from bags from the UNHCR. Like one of the High Commissioner of Refugees was seeing that like the bags to bring food were actually built into the fabric of this tent, and I think it really exemplifies how the UN is doing a lot of important work in different places. Doesn't mean it's a perfect organization, but it is saving many people from hell. Okay, so that's the UN in a nutshell, and it's important when you teach this to students. I would say this. Uh, Again, you can quote me on this, but you don't have to. You don't need to know anything about the UN to be good at Model UN. I was winning awards in Model UN for 2 years before I knew anything about the structure of the UN. So Model UN is a simulation activity where you need to be able to get people to agree on a policy and vote. So I would say if you're bringing this to your classroom, go to the fun parts. You can decide what the fun parts are. But a history lesson on the UN is not that. These slides, and you're welcome to use these, by the way, these are available in your Moodle, and I'm happy to send you the website where we have all of our presentations. I do this with new groups so they feel they know something about it, because it's better to do it than nothing. But you see, it's pretty user friendly. Many of you probably know more about the UN or certain parts of it than I presented here, but it's the countries working together. The organizations have names which are in the titles, and they do a lot of good stuff for people in bad places. That's the UN. Now you know. And it's enough to move on, but don't get into details. I've seen Model UN clubs and courses fail on multiple lessons on the structure of the organization that really is not helpful. There's a term shachor ba'inayim, like that's what can happen to students, and that's not our goal. Model UN is one of the most fun things students can do. And I've seen kids who you like couldn't pull sentences together in English, quoting the law of the sea and the International Treaty on the Rights of the Child by their third year in the program. But you got to get in with the fun. You got to make the friends. You got to say, oh, this is a place where me being, a fun, charming individual actually comes into play. And then they will get interested and they will read on their own and they will do all these great things. But it's got to start from a place of being accessible, and long lectures and slideshows about the UN is not the way to do that. Okay, so that is the introduction to the UN, which I think is student friendly. Now let's talk about Model UN. So Model UN is where students will wear suits and raise placards like what you see over here. How does Model UN work? So you, the participants, will represent a diplomat, research their position, present ideas through speeches, create a group to write down the ideas, and pass the written ideas with a majority vote. And after doing it for a few years, I boiled it down to one word for each section: research, speak, group, write, vote. And what does this look like? You could see speaking on a stage or from your seat. Group is walking around, shaking hands, talking to people, writing, generally around laptops, voting in smaller or larger spaces. This is the activity. You can do it in a room with 6. You can do it in a room with 400. And I have been in both, and it is challenging whichever way it is. And exciting. Like, you really have to get people to vote for you, and there's nothing academic that can get them to do that. Like, you have to, as a person, persuade them by being yourself an upstanding participant and get your interests to align. That doesn't mean you can't get people to vote for you by irregular means. I can say there was a conference in Scotland where I got 4 people to vote for me because I gave them chocolate. And I am not joking. I found these 4 participants who were on their phones, who didn't seem to care. And I said, hey, I got some chocolate. Will you vote for me? Like, you seem like fun, friendly people. I gave them chocolate. We ate lunch together, and they continued and were my biggest supporters till the end. So if you can get votes for chocolate, this is definitely an activity which can work for people and participants, but it's got to be done in the right way.
Is it
So
legal? This is the question.
100%. There's no one who
Yeah.
can enforce it.
Okay.
But that's like the point. Like, there is no legal or illegal in Model UN. Like, yes, there's illegal. Don't steal people's laptops. Don't, threaten them with physical violence. But if someone is charming and nice to you, and this is the beautiful part of this activity, is your students who don't talk, someone else who is charming and friendly will find them and talk to them and get them into the activity because they want their votes. It really is, I'd say, the top activity for how to win friends and influence people. Okay, so are there any questions on this so far? Okay, excellent. So we will move on. So I'll say thank you for having this recap of the UN. Okay, so doing some MUN, if we're going to do it, there are 3 parts of it. There's researching and preparation, and this is something that we've worked on in the coming past weeks. So hopefully we're ready. It's learning about our country, our committee, and our topic. Country is the countries that you already have according to the chart. Everyone here chose their countries. We're going to get to them very soon, but when we're in a conference, we actually make placards, which is these folded pieces of paper. A placard, by the way, is made out of cardboard or paper where countries' names are on them. You, by the way, in classrooms can also have students just put their names on this or represent anything, a book they like, a food they like. Like, the idea of voting and having a card with your name and getting into the role play is something which can make students feel comfortable. It's engaging. It is not limited to Model UN countries, but it does allow for a reset. Also, Daniel, teaching tip for those who are writing down teaching tips. After I let them choose their countries, I make them sit alphabetically. This breaks up friend groups and brings people to new places, and it's completely randomized. So it's something which can really help shift in the class dynamic. When I get to a new place, It's like first we do the introduction, we do the warm up. We ask them like what countries is the United Nations not. I say, what did you hear about the UN? What do we know? What do we think about these different operations? Then I have them choose their countries. Usually I say any country is good, just don't duplicate a country. And that checks if they're listening to each other or not. And by then things are moving very fast. And then we say, okay, you can choose from this list. Here's a list of countries. Pick whatever you want if you don't know. For fun, sometimes I ask them, which country do you want to be? And if you're not sure, then just I pick for them and I pick the most random countries. Okay, you're going to be Azerbaijan, you're going to be, or countries that, they don't know anything about or they think will be surprised to be. I usually find students try to skew towards, European countries that they've gone on vacation. So I try to go to other parts of the world. And after that, I have them sit alphabetically, and this already creates a whole new classroom setting. So first is choosing a country. Next is their committee. Which organization do they represent? So the committee we're representing today is the World Food Program. And while there's a lot of information on it, the main idea is that they deliver food assistance in emergencies. That's our topic. And our question is, should we give 240,000 tons of food to North Korea? So this is the story that we've gone through. The story is food aid for North Korea, and the UN World Food Program was halted because North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic rocket. So food was meant to go to them because they had a food shortage. What do we do? You also can explain words. By the way, this is a place, an introduction to expand vocabulary. You can focus on the bands. You can also just use international relations lexicon. What is cool is by the end of this course, you will all be able to use Model UN terminology, like I motion for an unmoderated caucus of 15 minutes, and you don't know what I just said, but by the end of it, you will. Same goes for students. I found that there is a comfort and an ease in speaking when the same formal procedural terms are being used again and again. So you can say, hey, everyone, we have a word of the day. Today's word is intercontinental. What does it break up to? Intercontinental, between continents. Okay? Also, I want to thank one of my former trainers and Ambassador. Ambassador is a company where we focus on speaking activities and was sort of my path into education as opposed to being a teacher who learned debating. I started as a model UNer and debater who then, got into education. And someone who was working as a product manager, and she was working with us teaching English to these programs in between jobs. She said, you should have pictures. I always draw a picture on the board of this scenario. So we made the following slides by her inspiration. So here's North Korea. Here's the food. A missile was tested by the government. Do we still send the food? Picture's worth, 1,000 words. So this is our scenario. Now, if you're going to use this slideshow with your class, great. You can already start discussing right now. If you have a group who are more advanced and more interested, you can continue with the following slides that I'm going to show you. But this is enough. This saying, should we give the food or not? What do you think? Maybe give 2 sentences on, on North Korea. But this is the scenario. Okay, so I'm going to continue. But like I'd say at this point, you can run through the UN, skip what Model UN does, and just get straight into the talking part. Okay, the food, 240,000 tons, is enough to feed 1 million for 1 year. North Korea has 26.5 million people. 10.6 million have food insecurity, which means that 1 million people means 10% of the people who have food insecurity will have food security. Or you can have 20% for half a year, or 40% for a quarter of a year. There are all these different possibilities. So it's important that these numbers are here. And our question is, I made a mistake. These next 2 slides are important, and this is the slide with which you can start, debating. The UN World Food Program, us. And today we're going to decide, should we still send the food? Should we give conditions, or should we send it to someone else because we feel they shouldn't get the food? And that is the purpose, and what that is our clash, which we've also talked about. There's a little map of the area, which shows, I like to tell people that the distance between North Korea and Japan is 500 kilometers. That's longer than certain countries. And you can see here there's China, Russia, South Korea, Japan. It's very distant, but like you see, like I tell students, and especially even more so for educators, Like we're intelligent people. We see the map, we get the idea. We understand. You know, it can be other part of the world. I don't know if anyone here has been to Korea or Japan or China or Russia, but okay, so we see some. Um, Most of us haven't, but doesn't mean we can't put ourselves in the shoes that we are now deciding what to do with this ship full of food. So there's background, hunger. North Korea has experience with famine, specifically the Great Famine of the mid 90s, where 2 million people died. As of 2022, 40% are considered undernourished, but they don't really publish data, so it could be more. So this could be, we don't know exactly the health or the number of citizens, so we don't really know how bad things are. Nuclear, a bunch of countries create, like, have nuclear programs, but none are as poor as North Korea, and the weapon comes at the expense of the people. They have done testing. Every year there's some form of either ballistic or nuclear test. And then there's the quote, I have a student read out dramatically. Let's have somebody read dramatically. Martin, you down to read dramatically?
Sure, no problem.
All right.
We have the right to develop weapons if we want to, and the right to life, food, decency, and respect. We ask the global community to trust us and send us the food aid as planned.
Beautiful. All right. So if that does not persuade you to want to send the food, then I guess we'll have to debate about it. Okay, so North Koreans are hungry, but the government is still testing. It's a global crisis. And we remind the question that we have, which is, do we send all the food to North Korea? Do we send some conditions? If not, do we send the food to someone else? Okay, so that is the recap of what we did in MUN 101 in a record amount of time.